Hello again, class. Welcome to our preparation on our Soteriology exam, the 4 books of the Pauline epistles that deal with the topic of soteriology, being Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, and the book of Galatians. As we prepare for the exam, I will be asking you for each of those books, and I want you to give me a short description of the theme that I've given you for each one of those. The theme for each book is described in the beginning of the presentation. Be comfortable with writing that out. A one-sentence description, according to what I gave you, will be sufficient. As we get into more detail about the books, I want you to explain in detail who the original audience was at Galatia. I want you to be familiar with that group of people, what was unique about them, so that when they received the good news message, they had an even more abundant reason to be excited. Certainly, we would think that all hearers, especially Gentiles, would be excited about hearing the gospel message, but there was something special about the people that made up the church at Galatia, for they were descendants from the Gauls. In Galatia, they were dealing with false teachers, the Judaizers, and these Judaizers were very self-centered. They were more focused on glorying in their flesh than glorying in the cross of Christ. And Paul went into great detail explaining that that is how you can tell the difference between a true apostle and an impostor. In Galatians, he also refers back to a very special event in the Old Testament in order to gain credibility on grace through faith, and that's the means of obtaining salvation. He goes all the way back to Genesis 15 and begins with Abraham, and he asks the question, how was it that Abraham received righteousness? It was because he believed. He believed in God's words. I like reminding our students that the means of salvation has never changed. It has always been believe God's words, trust His promises, and indeed Abraham did that to set a basis for salvation long before and superior to any type of works of the law. In 1 Corinthians, we're reminded that true believers don't only know the doctrine and agree with the doctrine, but they live it. And 1 Corinthians is a very practical book because it deals with people and their social lives. We must live it, not just claim it. In the book of 1st and 2nd Corinthians, we spent much time talking about the timing of the books being written. And we looked at 2 theories. There's a close theory, meaning that the 2 letters were written closely together. And then there was a more critical look at that, saying that they were not written closely together. Hebert goes into a lot of detail explaining what he recommends the readers to understand. And of course, he advocates the close theory, not the critical view. And that's what we recommend in this class as well. So be ready to talk at length about the close and critical theories and how that works as far as the timing of how much time there was between the letters, for it has much to do with where Paul was in the writing of both of the letters. Now, you also had a discussion question that spent much time on Hebert's book in pages 144 to 145, talking about the probable sequence of events. Well, we're going to talk about that a lot during our exam. So be prepared to describe that. Be prepared to fill in the blanks, if you will, on critical parts of that list that he gave us. Critical parts that will demonstrate that you understand the comings and goings and where Paul was and who was approaching him as he was writing 1st and 2nd Corinthians and all the events involved on those 2 pages. The book of Romans is certainly a special book in that it gives a great dialogue on the doctrine of salvation. And that is the most important part of the book. But I also want you to be ready to talk about the 2 other objectives that Paul had. When Paul was writing to the Church of Rome, there was 2 things that he had on his mind. One, he wanted to solicit the support of the Church of Rome to become his next headquarters as he was expanding his ministry to the western part of the Roman Empire. So he was asking for their help, and I'd like for you to talk at length about that as we discussed it in the notes. Also, he was looking for support, prayer support, if you will, on the collection, the love gift that he was taking back to Jerusalem for the saints in Jerusalem. And there was a reason for those love gifts. What was Paul trying to accomplish with those love gifts? He went into significant detail about the probable causes of that and how he was trying to unify the church as a whole through the love gifts of Gentile churches showing their support for the mother church, if you will, in Jerusalem. So that other point that I was talking about, the mood of the book of Romans is peculiar because obviously Paul is relaxed and he's talking highly and loftily in the doctrine of salvation. And if you recognize where he is when he's writing the book of Romans, and if you recognize what has transpired at that city, and we're talking about Corinth, it probably indicates a great success toward the latter part of the Corinthian ministry. So please be familiar with those parts of our notes as well. So I trust that you will do well on the exam, and if you have any questions, please give me a call. Thank you.